To today's Pepays Ireland lecture. I think we are always delighted to bring this lecture, especially bringing international colleagues to Pepays. We've kind of experienced a number of them already, and all of them are there shared in the Pepays website. In this case, Dr. Valeria Varea is a really good colleague, which is now teaching in the University of Perth in Australia, in Southern Australia.
Western.
Oh, Western.
Close enough.
After being lecturing in, first of all, was Sweden.
Australia, Sweden, back in Australia, moving around.
So she's kind of moving around the P space for a while now, and she kindly kind of accepted to think about her own presentation under the sustainability lenses, and as we discussed, that was an interesting challenge to have, and you know, we are, as always, we are kind of delighted to listen into different perspectives, and that's the main purpose of the Pepays Ireland lecture. So Valeria, you are very welcome to Perth. You're very welcome to the University of Limerick, and over to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Antonio.
No bother.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Antonio, for the presentation, and thank you, Brendan, for the invitation to be here today. It's actually my first time in Ireland, so yeah, that's pretty exciting. I must say, I underestimated the weather, the spring weather here. It's cold. It's like really freezing for me. But here, yeah, I know. Everyone is surprised when I said that, because some of you are wearing shorts, and yeah, this is colder than my winter in Perth, where I live. So massive difference. But here I am, very excited to be here. So I thought in starting this presentation with a little bit of a disclaimer, and just because I want to be honest from the beginning. When I said yes to the invitation to do this lecture, I was thinking, actually, I never used the term sustainability in my research or for any presentation. But then I thought, but actually I kind of do this a little bit. So I tried to make the links between my research area and sustainability, because I'm also aware, I have been reading a lot, and I'm aware that, yes, sometimes they go through different trends and they become more popular at certain time. The same, for example, with social justice and some others. So when I thought a little bit deeper, I was like, okay, yeah, actually, I kind of do this. But I must also say that here, for the presentation, I'm using sustainability in the broader sense, not just in the ecological domain that is the most popular one. But what I'm more interested is in the social and the cultural domains, because those ones are the ones that are linked more to my research area. Because my research area, and that's why the title of the presentation is Practices for Everybody. My research area is about the body from a social culture perspective. So I try to make the links with sustainability for this presentation that hopefully you're going to see later on. And I pose some reflective questions, even though I don't have the answers, but yes, something that we can discuss at the end as well. And I know that there have been many studies about sustainability and PE lately in the last few years. And we know that there is a positive synergy between PE and the Sustainable Development Goals, and that PE has been shown to have the capacity to mobilize certain behaviors that could be related to the Sustainability Development Goals. Like, for example, the first 3 or almost 4 of those, that is improving health and well-being, quality and education, gender equality, and enhancing peace and justice. And we also know that the Charter for Quality PE states that PE must go a little bit beyond the physical domain only and has to be used as a tool for multiculturalism, inclusion, and equity. And those are the parts involved that are more relevant for my research and where I think that my research fits in with sustainability and physical education, and a little bit to sport to a certain extent. And just to give you a little bit of the background of different studies and what the literature says, more related to my research area, we know that school PE is an interesting place, and it's a space where students' bodies are like more in display, because things related to their bodies, such as ability, the shape of their body, gender, they are more visible in PE classes compared to other classes, like, for example, a math class or a social science class. And we also know that probably because of that, some students have been bullied more in PE classes rather than in other spaces in school. And that's basically because PE bodies are more visible all the time. And not just students' bodies, but also teachers' bodies. So now I'm moving on into the teachers' bodies and physical education, because there has also been plenty of studies that they suggest that PE teachers may actually do more harm than good when trying to educate susceptible adolescents when it comes to issues related to the body. And it is expected for them to be role models for students all the time, and not just in terms of ability and how well they demonstrate a skill in class, but also in relation to their body and how their bodies look like and how fit-looking they are. And there have also been some studies that suggest that students show less respect to PE teachers, that they don't have like the stereotypical PE teacher's body that is expected for them to have, which I think is quite important. Now moving on with a different group, pre-service PE teachers, and what the literature suggests. And those are two papers that we wrote together with Gustavo González Calvo. That's another Spanish colleague, a friend from Antonio. So we have been working on issues related to the body for a while. So the first paper is about these expectations that are for PE teachers when it comes to demonstrating health and fitness through their bodies, and how their understandings and their perceptions are usually very narrow, where they feel the pressure that they need to demonstrate like a fit body, a body that is not allowed to be injured, and basically young bodies as well. And the second one was also quite interesting because it was about the influence of consumerism on some PE teachers in Spain. And in that study, the results suggest that it's not just how their bodies look like, but also what they wear for PE teachers in Spain. Like if they wear like the correct attire for a PE teacher with all the sporty brands, and brands that we know they are quite expensive, especially for the PE teacher in Spain, that the salary from them is probably quite different than a salary from a PE teacher from here or from Australia. So they were also somehow influenced by the consumer culture as well, and not just by the shape and the look of their bodies. And now moving on to another population, teacher educators. There are also plenty of studies that demonstrate that PE is a very white profession, and that there are like massive gaps between that white dominant profession and then the school students that are coming into our classrooms in different places, but of course mainly in Australia, that they are very ethnically diverse. And also the few studies that are about this gap between non-white academics usually demonstrate that non-white academics exposing their experiences of racialization and othering, and not just in terms of ethnicity, but also in terms of gender and age and language background, they are not that common. And we know that a teacher curriculum, a teacher education curriculum that is developed by the white dominant group and is taught by staff from this dominant group is very likely to reflect the values and the beliefs of this group. So that was a little bit of background of what the literature says and different studies. Now I would like to move on to some of my current projects. Some of them are finishing already, some of them are starting, to see hopefully how I try in my research to address some of these issues that were exposed. So this one, the first one, it's a project that was funded by the Swedish Research Council from when I was living and working in Sweden. It was together with Mikael Kennerstedt and Jim Barker. And that was the title of the project, Educational Clash or Educational Potential, School-Age Asylum Seekers Encounters with Swedish Health Education. And for that project, we wanted to focus on health education in Swedish schools in general, not just PE, because in Sweden, health education is addressed through different subjects. It's like very broad. So of course, physical education and health is one of the subjects, but they also have home economics, and they also have biology and social studies, that they also address different aspects of health and well-being in a broader sense, not just the physical component of health and well-being. And of course, as we had Mikael there, it was from a salutogenic approach, that project, and importantly, from a strengths-based approach as well. So we got different results already for that one. Basically, what we saw, and here I mean both teachers and students, because we wanted to know their voices, but from both cohorts, teachers and students, that the two of them, they have very narrow understandings of health and well-being. And the students in particular, that those students, they have been in Sweden just no more than 2 years, between 4 months and 2 years. All the previous values and beliefs about health and well-being that they were bringing from their home country, they were slowly like being erased, and they were adapting their dominant beliefs and values of Western cultures regarding health and well-being. So I was just wondering, how is it that we can create sustainable practices in health education in general in schools? And here I don't have the answer. Probably that will come later on. But it's like that was the focus and some of the main results of that project. And from there, we published 2 papers. There are more coming soon. But the first one, this one, that was about the teachers' voices. And the second one was about the students' voices. So for the first one, the teachers' voices, those were the main results. We identified 6 interrelated health and well-being discourses. And they were not so clearly identified. We did like that for analysis purposes, but they were more like interrelated. The first one was the strongest one, was the physical activity discourse, and particularly among the PE teachers. But then there were also some other discourses that were the identity and social relations discourse, sex and romantic relationships, psychological health discourse. That one was also quite strong. The race discourse, that was quite interesting. And now we're going to have a paper coming from that specific discourse, because in the way that different people, teachers and students, saw risk when it comes to health and well-being was quite interesting. And the 6th one was the democracy and society discourse, that one was very much related to the Swedish society in general and how Swedish society works. But all of them were related somehow to health and well-being. Even some of them were like very far away from the physical activity and nutrition kind of discourse that we had at the beginning that was very strong. And for the second paper, that was the students' voices, those were like the three main categories. So from the students' data, we basically found that some of them, some participants, they had a little bit of an enthusiastic perception about health education, and particularly when it came to topics that they were not usually taught in their home countries, such as sex education, sexuality, relationships, consent. Those were quite interesting topics for some of them. A second category is about a disengaged perception of health education, and those were the students that they thought that those previous topics, they needed to be taught at home by the parents rather than in schools. And the third one was more like a marginalized perception of health education. And in that category, we had students that they thought that some other topics related to health and well-being were important, but they were not covered in health education in Sweden. And those topics, some examples were like, for example, friendship and the support of a family, because some of them went to Sweden by themselves and they lost contact with their family members and friends from their home countries. So that's basically from that large project from the Swedish Research Council about health education in Swedish schools. But now I'm going to move to another one. This one was a smaller project. It's actually two projects together. It's like these two from the Swedish Research Council for Sports Science. So in the first application, we proposed to explore fat shaming in coaching practices. And there, I mean in elite sport, not just recreational sport. And a continuation of that study was to explore skinny shaming, but in masculine connotated sports. So it's like a bigger project when you put two of them together. And that's just a paper that summarized some of the main findings that we had. Because we knew for this project that the group of participants that we were going to be working with, the coaches, were not like bad coaches, that they were like shaming their athletes like explicitly. They were actually like good coaches. They really care about the athletes. So we tried to go a layer, a little bit more in depth, to analyze instead the practices that have the potential to be shaming, rather than the shaming per se. Because we know that there is quite a bit of literature about body shaming, particularly in feminine sports, and how athletes are body shamed. So that's why we wanted to work with coaches, and we wanted to go a layer a little bit more in depth. And again, what I ask here, how can we actually create practices in especially elite sport that are sustainable? So those were the main 7 categories that we came up with in the results. First, we were seeing that some of those coachings were using unrecognition and avoidance, because they were basically saying that everything was okay in their practices, that those things, body shaming, don't happen in Sweden, that usually happens abroad, but that in Sweden there is a better culture. So that's what the coaches were saying. A second category was about the good body talk and how they were talking with their athletes about what they need to do to have a good body according to their sports. The third one was about education of athletes. And interestingly, they were trying to educate their athletes, but when they tried to do this, they were bringing external speakers to the clubs, like nutritionists or psychologists, to educate the athletes. The fourth one was about the use of humor and irony when they were making comments to their athletes. And there, they were quite specific, because the coaches were coaching both male and female athletes, and they were making a difference, usually, saying that they approach female athletes in a different sense, And they were using humor, sometimes an irony, with their male athletes, not their female athletes, because they thought that women were more susceptible to making a joke or something like that. The fifth one was the use of science and tests. Those coaches were basically saying, like, if the numbers, the measurements that they were taking, they were showing that everything was okay. So everything was okay. There was no need to intervene or to do anything because numbers were correct. The sixth one, the making of weight gain a lack of motivation. Basically, they were saying, like, if an athlete put on weight, it was probably because they had a personal issue, usually related to relationships issues or things like that, and that they were not motivated enough to be an elite athlete. And the seventh one was about individualization. It was basically, okay, if an athlete did put weight, we need to individualize their training, their nutrition. That athlete needs to be put apart to have a special training kind of thing. And for this project also, we tried to include coaches from different sports. So feminine connotated, masculine sports, and neutral sport. So we had a little bit of variety there. We had artistic gymnastics, figure skating, artistic swimming as feminine sports. But we also have boxing, ice hockey, discus and shot put as more masculine sports, and more neutral sports like orienteering and cross-country skiing. And we also had a variety of team and individual sports and winter and summer sports. So we can have a little bit of an overview of everything. But that's basically the main results from that project. And now I'm just going to move to the last one. This one I'm just starting, at least with the first one, that is funded by the Swiss Research Council again. And we did a pilot study from ECU, that is this one. So the pilot study was on orthorexia athletica, mainly with recreational exercisers. And the other one that we are just starting is about orthorexia nervosa and its relationship with health education in Swedish schools. So I only have results from the pilot study. And for that study, we basically design a survey, and then we interview recreational exercisers and some more formal exercisers as well. And we found that the survey was mainly to explore their eating habits, the quality of the food that they consume, how preoccupied they were about the quality of the food, and their exercise routine as well. And we throw in there on purpose a few questions also about body satisfaction and dissatisfaction. So the results showed that even though most participants consider themselves to be fit or very fit and healthy or very unhealthy, most of them, they were dissatisfied with their body shape and weight. And again, the reflective question that I propose here for those two projects is how can we create sustainable practices in health education in schools, but also in informal sport? That informal sport, I think, is quite interesting because it doesn't have all the formal structures that formal participation in sport has with club participation and coaches. But that was a little bit of a summary of my projects. So now it's moving on. How can we actually create sustainable futures for PE and sport? And this is an example, for example, for pre-service teachers. Again, that's a paper with Gustavo. That there, we try to focus on a specific sample of pre-service PE teachers because we thought that sample was quite atypical, quite different than the rest of the pre-service PE teachers. They included one participant that she self-identified as lesbian, another one that self-identified as anorexic, another one visually impaired, like significantly visually impaired, and another one that was quite big. So we use norm criticality, that is a perspective coming from Sweden that is quite strong there, to see how those pre-service teachers embodied norm criticality in their everyday life. And we wanted to show their stories. They produced some narratives, and those narratives, they also used drawings to identify themselves with a drawing, just as a way to demonstrate how we can resist some dominant discourses about what is it to be like a PE teacher and look like a PE teacher in Spain. Now, when it comes to school teachers in PE, I don't know if you have read this paper. I know it's quite old, but I thought it was quite a fascinating paper from Katie Fitzpatrick and Dan Russell. That they actually, the second author, Dan Russell, is or was a PE teacher in schools, but again, it was a quite different PE teacher. He was all the time being quite critical, and he was making sure that he was demonstrating how power relationships work in the school structure to students. But he was also simultaneously using playfulness in their classes. Even though he was teaching very critical topics, with his playfulness, he was having more engaging classes with his students, and he was embodying that criticality all the time. So I thought that was like a really nice example. And when it comes to school students, for me this is key, just to celebrate diversity. I know probably here in Ireland or in Europe, it's more common to have diverse groups in a classroom or in a workplace. But in Australia, it's becoming more common too, but it's too far away from everything. So it's not the same, I think, than in Europe. But even the Australian PE curriculum, it claims to have a strengths-based approach. It says actually that it has a strengths-based approach, but when we see reality, sometimes, it's not the same. I also think empathy is key here. And one of my colleagues at ECU, he's working in one of his units with empathy maps with his students, and I think he's doing like a really good job. I don't know all the steps about that methodology that he's using, but I think he's making progress in that sense. And I remember Dylan Scotland, he made a presentation for us. I remember that he said that just starting with baby steps when it comes to inclusion and what we can do to try to be more inclusive with our students. So when it comes to teacher educators, and those are two papers that, I think are a little bit relevant. The first one, I wrote it after a few years of being in Australia, honestly, being frustrated with all the whiteness in my profession. And the second one, that is more recent, it's with Carla Luguetti and Luisa Goncalves, that at least now is like I have two more South American women that we are working together in PIT in Australia. And basically we wanted to expose our experiences of racialization, but not only in terms of ethnicity, but also their intersection with gender, age, sexuality, and language background as well. So now I feel lucky that at least I have the two of them as well, and probably some others, because by creating this community of practices and just by the process of writing that paper, that was quite emotional for us, it's a good way to start and try to create more equitable spaces and reflective spaces in PIT. And just to finish, and this is a little bit outside of PE, this is more related to sport. We also know that there is quite a lot of literature about sustainability and sport and sustainable practices. But I think, like, if we just truly care about our athletes' well-being, that's a really good starting point. And not just adopting these practices, as we saw with one of my projects, that the coaches were just saying that everything was okay, that they were not intervening unless there was something very wrong. Just by the fact of being proactive and just instead of just waiting if there is a problem, even if that implies having those uncomfortable talks with athletes, it's a good starting point rather than sitting there and wait until there is like a real issue to address. But now, just to conclude, why is it that we should care about all this, or why is it that I think we should care about all this? If we are serious about sustainability, we need to start asking ourselves, what are we doing, specifically from our field and from our jobs, to contribute to a more sustainable world? What are we doing to make sure that the practices that we have in all the different sectors of PE are sustainable? Are we actually catering for all students' abilities and interests? Are we being inclusive enough in our workplaces for staff and students from different backgrounds? And I mean not just in policies, because we all know that university policies love internationalization, but in reality, because reality shows something quite different. We all know that sport and physical activity can bring joy and health and well-being benefits, and that kids are more likely to participate later in their life if they have positive experiences in sport and PE. So just, I think, as good educators that we all are, just to take care of the well-being of others is just a good starting point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valeria. A very engaging presentation. I'll actually start with a comment on the chat from Carmen, who had been with us but just had to leave right now for another meeting. Apologies having to leave. I just wanted to thank you for such an engaging presentation. I regularly use your papers, particularly the students' drawings of a good and bad PE teacher in our Antonio and I sociologies, or our sociology module, and our students absolutely love and engage a lot with them. So thanks again for organizing. That was from Carmen, so a really nice comment that I think summarises.
I don't think we need to record.
Oh yeah, the question, yeah, perfect. Yeah, thanks.
Do you want me to do the advertising before?
Yeah, why not actually? Just hold a second. Well, so yeah, you can do your slides, and we can include that in the recording.
Okay, can we hold the questions for a little bit?
Yeah, of
okay,
course.
Before we move to questions and discussion, just a little bit of advertisement here. Apologies for that. But just to let you know, we are going to be hosting an ISEP special seminar at the end of the year in one of our campuses in Western Australia. Those are the dates. The specialist seminar is going to be on body politics in and through movement. So we thought the dates kind of on purpose, because if you have any interest in going to AARE, that is usually at the beginning of December, that is our biggest conference nationally, that there is a strong HP SIG there, and you can contact Dylan for more information about that if you're interested. This year is going to be in Newcastle, so that's going to be beginning of December. So in your way back to Ireland, you can always make a stopover in Banbury, that's the name of the city where it's going to be, for the ISEP seminar, and then continue back to Ireland. So the dates are kind of on purpose for the European audience, because you actually need to go back like through Perth anyway to come back to Europe. So, yeah. And the second piece of advertising, we have 2 PhD opportunities, 2 scholarships, for those 2 specific projects. The first one is with David Aldous, myself and John Penny as supervisors. The second one that is related to my project is with myself and Don. Scholarships, they open twice a year. I think one is in May and the other one in November or at the end of the year. And even if there is someone interested in doing something different outside of the project, they can still apply, even if it is on a different project. So yes, those are some scholarship opportunities.
Brilliant. Thank you, Valeria, for your pitch.
No worries.